All right, Nick, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons have had a lot of moves this offseason. I think they set themselves up the past two seasons really, really well. A lot of young guys coming to the fold looking really good, but it's not always the young guys that you need to pay attention to. Some of the under the radar moves are starting to stand out, and I think they may contribute a ton more this season than people are thinking of. I think this story is going to be really interesting for the Falcons fans. Before we dive into all of that, I'm Andrew, that's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, there's some signings that came in the Falcons. They're looking like they're going to contribute a whole lot more than people were expecting. Maybe came in, become a starter for the defense, something along those lines. But being a leader, being the green dot, being the voice of this defense, I don't think people really expected that out of Devin Diablo when he was signed at first. But from what we've heard by all accounts, he's doing fantastic, and everybody in the Falcons camp is loving what he's doing. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. Our first article of two here is from AtlantaFalcons.com. This was earlier this month. Raheem Morris speaking on Devin Diablo says his athleticism stands out. It's been unique. His length stands out, which has also been unique. The Falcons head coach Raheem Morris says, "I'm really keen. I'm really him in keying and diagnosing behind the ball is probably a lot better than we thought, and I'm fired up to see it." So earlier last month, Raheem Morris talking about, Diablo looking good. He's keying in, he's diagnosing plays, he's really, shaping up in learning the defense really, really quickly. Then we get to just a few days ago. It says the Falcons didn't have the salary cap room to make any huge splashes in free agency this offseason, but the team thinks they really found something in Diablo, whose base salary is only $1.66 million this season. Head coach Raheem Morris has been impressed with Diablo's size, length, and speed. Even more than that, Morris believes Diablo is capable of wearing the green dot as kind of the quarterback of the defense. It sounds like the former Raider has a solid chance at a starting job at inside linebacker alongside Caden Ellis. This was from Mark Marmonde of ESPN. So it sounds like not only is Devin Diablo looking good, he has great athleticism, his size is obviously good, being 6'3", 6'4", linebacker, coming in here, doing a lot of good stuff in that aspect. But on top of that, he's picking up the defense, he's learning, diagnosing, and now they're saying he's capable of being the green dot, the quarterback of the defense over guys like Caden Ellis, who's already been there for a couple of years. This is really impressive to me, and I think it's even more impressive when there's a little snippet in there about what he's getting paid versus other guys around the league who are leading linebackers at their position, the quarterbacks of the defense. Let's look at our next chart here, just showing some top linebackers, especially some guys in their division, some guys already on the team, what they're getting paid versus what they contributed last season. So first off, you see here Roquan Smith's salary cap hit absolutely through the roof. He's a fantastic linebacker. He deserves the money, but still getting paid a ton more than a guy like Devin Diablo here. When you look at what he brings to the table, about 23 some million dollars per year for Roquan, or at least for his 2025 cap hit. You look at Demario Davis, he's doing pretty well. Saints linebacker, been around for a long time, not getting paid nearly as much as Roquan Smith, but still it looks like about $7.9 million cap hit for Demario Davis. You look at Devin Diablo, actually a touch under $4 million. I know it said 1.66 base, but his cap hit for 2025, a touch under $5 million. Then we look at Caden Ellis, a guy's about $8.9 million cap hit this year. We look at the red columns here. This is when you combine their contributions last year, their tackles, versus how many dollars they're getting paid. So basically a statistic showing how many tackles are they giving per $1 million? How much stats are they giving for the money? Roquan Smith, it's kind of tough, but he's getting paid a whole lot, so it's really low actually. 4 tackles per $1 million. You look at what Demario Davis is, not too shabby for Demario Davis, about 12.7 tackles per $1 million. You look at jump to Caden Ellis, what he brings to the table there, about 12.1 tackles per $1 million. Now we look at Devin Diablo. This guy, the value he brings to this defense, 15 tackles, 15.1 tackles actually per $1 million. So he's beating everybody as far as a value standpoint. He's getting paid the lowest amount, but also for how much he's getting paid, he brings the most stats to the table. So this guy, not only is he diagnosing, not only is he looking like to be the leader, the green dot of this defense, but he brings a lot to the table at a very, very good value for this Falcons defense. I think this could be a huge get. We talked about teams that are wanting to be playoff contenders. The Falcons are shaping up to be a team that looks like in a pretty open division, they could make some noise. What do they need? They need under the radar. They need guys that come in at a discount and overperform what they're doing. It looks like Devin Diablo can be that guy. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Falcons fans, in the comment section below, we're talking linebacker position. We're talking about, voice of the defense. So I'll give you kind of a two-part question. So who is your favorite Falcons linebacker all time or leader green dot type of player of the defense of all time, in case there's a guy who wasn't the linebacker that was doing that? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, either leader of the defense or best linebacker in Falcons history of all time. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what are your thoughts on everything here out of Atlanta?
So there is a lot to unpack. I think first and foremost, what your graph highlighted is the importance, and you kind of mentioned it, is not necessarily going out and just signing the biggest name possible to address a problem with your team to get better at a certain position group, because there is that value element. Like Roquan Smith is a really good player, but he's expensive on a per tackle basis. If you throw a lot of dollars, if you throw a lot of capital at a guy like Roquan Smith, a star player at his position, that's pulling a lot of value away from other positions, from other areas of your team where you're going to have to spend some dollars, right? So you have to be very smart and very selective. A lot of people, a lot of fans are always like, "Oh, let me go out and get this star, get this second tier free agency, and throw a lot of money at him because he's a big name guy, or I know the name." That's not necessarily the best strategy. A lot of times, like you mentioned, it's these value deals, finding quality players at low prices where the production per dollar spent in salary cap is extremely high. The greatest example of this in recent memory was last season when the Philadelphia Eagles signed linebacker Zach Ballin for a similar kind of amount, couple $1,000,000, and he had a massive year for Philadelphia. They got so much value for him, much more than any other team at the linebacker position, that it opened up a lot of opportunities for the Philadelphia Eagles to spend money in other spots and obviously put them in a great position to win the Super Bowl last season. Now let's talk about Devin Diablo and his fit in terms of what he can bring to the Atlanta Falcons. So everyone talks about the Falcons and their issues rushing the passer last season and really last couple of seasons, and that's 100% true. But people forget they were the third worst team in the National Football League in 2024, according to PFF, when it came to tackling. They were not good as a tackling team, right around that 30 grade. For anyone who remembers anything from taking tests in high school or college or middle school or whatever, getting a 30 out of 100, not good. Clearly an area they need to upgrade, which clearly involves, if we're talking tackling, the linebacker position. Now, is Diablo an elite tackler? You can make an argument. He's had some really good seasons when he was with the Raiders. He had some disappointing seasons, but he's at his worst, a significant upgrade at the tackling department, 25 plus points or so when you look at Diablo sliding into a key linebacking role, improving the Falcons tackling grade based on where they were last year. So in a key weakness, a key deficit Atlanta had to really struggle with last season, they got significantly better. Again, low cost in doing so. Now, here's where it gets very interesting with Devin Diablo. If you look at his career with the Raiders, it's kind of crazy. So his first season, he has really solid numbers, great tackler, solid in the run defense, good pass rush, right? There's a lot of good things. His second season, not quite as good, but similar kind of theme. Third season, again, pretty solid. And then he just really falls off last season. So I guess the real question is, has he declined as he worked through his 4 years in the National Football League? Or was he just on a terrible Raiders situation in 2024? I think it's the fact he was with a bad Raiders team that was devastated by injuries, especially on the defensive line. Obviously, they spent a lot of money on Christian Wilkins, their interior defensive tackle, to kind of blow things up for opposing offenses, make it easier for their linebackers like Diablo. Wilkins got hurt. The Raiders' defensive line in general had a lot of injuries. And so the linebacking core for Las Vegas, and by the way, there was nobody else helping out Diablo. It was Devin Diablo and then a bunch of guys in that linebacking core, Robert Spillane and those two guys just kind of holding down the entire front seven cornerstone of that defense, especially the second half of the year when all the injuries fell into the Raiders' lap. And it just put Diablo in a lot of bad situations. No defensive tackles in front of him were eating up double teams, right? It was the Raiders' secondary was so bad. They obviously had to play two deep safeties all the time. So you had to cover a lot of ground if you're a linebacker, never filled the box. It put the linebackers in terrible positions. I look at Diablo coming to the Falcons, much better secondary, much better back end than you have with the Raiders by a significant margin. The front four for Atlanta's gotten a lot better. I know Jared is gone, but we've talked about the addition of guys like Walker and Pierce Jr. I think they're trending in a solid direction. I like Morgan Fox, kind of an underrated veteran piece. You, of course, have Onyemata, got a bunch of other guys as well. Solid group up front, much better than he had in Las Vegas, especially with the injuries. Much better secondary. I see Devin Diablo kind of going back to where he was early in his career with the Raiders as an elite tackler, an excellent run defender who can do some good things in the pass rush department as well. Because again, he doesn't have to do everything. And I think that's where the Falcons and Raheem Morris are really excited to use him for his cerebralness, for his intelligence, the green dot aspect of it, because he doesn't have to fight off two blockers, doesn't have to find a way to make a tackle with no safety help, right? He doesn't have to cover two gaps. He doesn't have to do a lot of crazy stuff like he had to in 2024 with Las Vegas. He can just play football a traditional linebacking way while also being the mental leader of this Falcons defense if he earns that role. So across the board, however you want to look at this was an outstanding pickup for the Atlanta Falcons. The value aspect in terms of production, off the charts. You talk about the potential for Devin Diablo now that he's on a much more competent franchise than he was with the Raiders last season. I think is sky high. I think this is a great fit. Again, you talk about these under the radar moves. We like to focus on first round picks and big time trades and things like that. And rightly so, those have the biggest impact. But these sort of cheap deals, these low cost things to bring in veteran players, these are the high upside opportunities. And based on what we're seeing when it comes to Devin Diablo, the Falcons have set themselves up very nicely to pull off what could be a heck of a steal through free agency.
Yeah, Nick, and I just want to touch on something you say. You talk about Raiders defense last season. We don't even really have to talk about what was available for that team last season. Let's talk about who's on that team now. And you can see how many new faces were or players that didn't play on the field for the Raiders last year. And you go through all of this, and I'm counting 6 new players on defense for the Raiders, just showing there wasn't a lot to love where they did last year. The defensive line, as you alluded to, Wilkins was hurt. He didn't really play last year. Malcolm Kuntz is back. He didn't really play last year. They got the rookie corner in there. They had to go out on free agency, get a safety in Jeremy Chin. They also had to double up. They brought in 2 new linebackers to the fold. So as far as help for what Devin Diablo was getting with that Raiders team, not a whole lot to love on that team other than Max Crosby on defense. Obviously, we're not going to slight him, but this is a team in the Raiders last year that I would agree with you. I think the dip in production for Devin Diablo was very heavily weighted on the Raiders were a bad team last year. And we've seen guys like this all the time come off a bad season after statistically usually being pretty decent or pretty good. They have a bad team around them. Everything falls apart. They go to a good team, a team on the upswing, which I would consider the Atlanta Falcons to be on. They have like a breakout. Well, it's not necessarily a breakout. They were good before. They were just able to scoop them up at a discount because of a down year. I think this was a smart move by the Falcons to come in and say, hey, we recognize what was going on last year with the Raiders. We recognize the dip in production and why that probably happened. We come in, we get Devin Diablo, a guy who already looks like he's paying off for us at a very good value. And now the Falcons set up, like you said, the Eagles example I think is perfect. You got to have those kind of value plays like a Zach Bound type of guy to come in and really dominate. And this is the start of the Falcons here, getting a value play, building a strong team around a really good core of players.